feel so strongly about officially recognizing Palestine for statehood, why are you waiting for President Trump to leave the country? Why can't you just do it right now? And isn't there a risk in rewarding Hamas with that?
Well, let me be really clear about Hamas. They're a terrorist organisation who can have no part in any future governance in Palestine. And what happened on October the 7th was the worst attack since the Holocaust. We have extended family in Israel. I understand firsthand the psychological impact that that had across Israel. So I know exactly where I stand in relation to Hamas. Hamas, of course, don't want a two-state solution. They don't want peace. They don't want a ceasefire. So I'm very clear where I stand on Hamas. Okay. On the question of recognition, I made my position clear at the end of July as to the timing, which has got nothing to do with this state visit, and I've discussed it with the President, as you would expect amongst two leaders who respect each other and like each other and want to bring about a better solution in the best way that we can. Thank you so much. Can I go back then to Robert at ITV?
Robert Person, ITV. Mr. President, you uniquely, you alone in the whole world, have the power to persuade Prime Minister Netanyahu to stop the demolition of Gaza City, to stop the starvation of Palestine, and to stop the killing of civilians. If not now, when will you exercise that power to tell him to stop?
Sure.
And then for both of you...
But you do understand about October 7th.
Of course,
you do understand.
So believe me, I understand.
One of
about
the worst days in the history of humanity. What happened, I have seen the tapes. Babies that are 4 months old and just chopped up to pieces. And you've seen the tapes and I've seen the tapes. You're a professional and so am I. And people forget about October 7th. I can't forget about it. So I want it to end, but I want the hostages back. I don't want the hostages used as human shields, which is what Hamas is threatening to do.
But as soon as they're back, that's the moment you will tell Netanyahu
well,
to stop.
It would certainly help, but I have to have the hostages back. And I don't want them back piecemeal, as I said before. I want them back.
And on a separate issue, free speech, your Vice President, Vance, said that free speech is under attack in the UK. Do you agree with him? And Prime Minister, we saw the dismissal of a very well-known chat show host in America last night, Mr. Kimmel. Is free speech more under attack in Britain or America?
Well, Jimmy Kimmel was fired because he had bad ratings more than anything else, and he said a horrible thing about a great gentleman known as Charlie Kirk. And Jimmy Kimmel is not a talented person. He had very bad ratings, and they should have fired him a long time ago. So, you know, you can call that free speech or not. He was fired for lack of talent. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, on the question of Charlie Kirk, can I just express how shocking that is, I think, to everybody who believes in free speech and in democracy. It sent shockwaves through the world. And I know that he was a friend of the president, and I reached out straight away to the president because I understood how impactful it would be on him and his family. And we all need to be absolutely clear about that. Whatever our political views, it is shocking and is to be condemned. On free speech, not much to add to the answer I gave earlier. This country's had free speech for a very, very long time. It is part of who we are as a country, and it is the values that we fought for. We fought for it during the Second World War alongside each other. So we need no reminding of the importance of free speech in this country. Thank you, Robert. And I go to Beth for the final question, please. Beth.
Thank you so much.
Sky.
Thank you, Beth Rigby, Sky News. Thank you, Prime Minister. If I could start with you. Prime Minister, President Trump has said he's ready to impose major sanctions on Russia if NATO countries stop purchasing Russian oil. He's got a point, hasn't he? Is that what you now believe is needed to bring Putin properly to the table? And what's your message to the President on US sanctions? And Mr. President, if I may, the King praised your personal commitment last night to finding solutions to the world's most intractable conflicts. You have invested much of your time and effort in Ukraine. But even as you seek to broker a deal, President Putin is escalating the war. He's firing drones into NATO airspace. You say he has let you down. Was it a mistake to invite him to Alaska? Do you regret it?
No.
And is it time to squeeze him, sir, and scare him and impose sanctions? And finally, if I may, the elephant in the room, Lord Mandelson, he is no longer the ambassador. Do you have some sympathy with him that he lost his job over historic links to Jeffrey Epstein? Thank you very much, sir.
I don't know him, actually. I had heard that, and I think maybe the Prime Minister would be better speaking of that. That was a choice that he made, and I don't know. What is your answer to that?
Well, I mean, it's very straightforward. Some information came to light last week which wasn't available when he was appointed, and I made a decision about it, and that's very clear. On the question of the pressure on Putin and on Russia, which is obviously really important, look, I think it is a challenge to Europe. There are a number of European countries which are too reliant on energy from Russia. The UK actually obviously has almost got nothing at all, but we do need to bear down and work with our European counterparts here. There are one or two countries, I think, that do need to look again at the question of energy. There's no one silver bullet here. We do have to have a wider suite of sanctions, which we've put in place a number of times, working across Europe and with the United States. And of course, we must, and we are, making sure that Ukraine is in the strongest position now, because one of my long concerns here has been that whilst we talk about a ceasefire, and we all want a ceasefire, and we talk about what might happen after a ceasefire, we mustn't forget that Ukraine needs our support now, and we've said we stand with Ukraine from the start to the finish, and that means we must continue to supply them with what they need in order to fight this war, which of course resulted from and is a result of Russian aggression. We have particularly done the sort of leadership role in the coalition of the willing, so that if there is a ceasefire and if there is a deal, and I do hope there is, that is then lasting and not then broken, because given previous history, I don't trust Putin. Thank you.
Very simply, if the price of oil comes down, Putin's going to drop out. He's going to have no choice. He's going to drop out of that war. And when I found out that the European nations were buying oil from Russia, and as you know, I'm very close to India. I'm very close to the Prime Minister of India. I spoke to him the other day, wished him a happy birthday. We have a very good relationship. He put out a beautiful statement, too. We have, but I said, you know, I sanctioned them. China is paying a very large tariff right now to the United States, but I'm willing to do other things, but not when the people that I'm fighting for are buying oil from Russia. If the oil price comes down, very simply, Russia will settle. And the oil price is way down. You know, we got it way down. We're drilling and we produce more oil than anybody else in the world. We're doing a lot. But I was disappointed to see that. And the Prime Minister was disappointed to see that. And it wasn't him. It was other countries. And you can't do that. You can't do that. You can't. That's not playing fair with the United States. And we can't have that. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Want even more Fox News on YouTube? Become a Fox News Patriot today. Click join to find out how.